Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be a part of this special conference as having worked as a professor here in Middlesex Business School for 25 years nearly. I'm really sorry, I must apologize, I'm not able to be with you in person today because I am traveling today. However, we'll continue. So the subject that I was given was this rather large subject of 2 HR imperatives for evolving organizations: succession and talent management, and analytics, HR analytics. 2 areas that I have worked on for many, many years. In fact, in Middlesex, we run a 24-week module as part of our master's program in HRM, in HR analytics, 24 weeks. And what can I do to try and give you the flavor of these 2 subjects in just half an hour? What I've decided to do is to combine them together and to focus on how HR analytics can help us be better at succession and talent management. I do invite you at the end to contact me for questions or further clarification or any comments you have, because obviously our time is very scarce. We often use the word talent without understanding fully really what it means, and many organizations apply it very differently. Some use the word talent basically just to mean they're graduates. But the word talent, I think if we look it up, it means something special and valuable. Now, we can say our people are our most important asset, so everybody is valuable. And of course, there is a case for that. But I think the concept here is that there are, in reality, some that are more valuable to us and to our mission as an organization than others. So just a quick run on different approaches to using this word. And this is a spectrum of inclusivity versus exclusivity. So to what extent are we going to include people in our term of talent management? We could say, well, everybody has some talent. And so talent management includes all employees, or nearly all employees. And that's a very reasonable thing to say, because everybody does have some talent. But then, you know, that doesn't make talent management anything special. It's just the way in which we manage all our people. And we want to manage them in the best way, of course. So it doesn't really do it for me. Now, many organizations go to the other extreme, and they say talent means those who will make future senior leaders. And I wonder if you realize that in most organizations, that is a very small percentage. In fact, research shows you're very lucky if you have 1% or a bit more of your entire population that comes under that category. And interestingly enough, these are the people who are probably most able to look after themselves. I'm not saying we shouldn't pay attention to them. I'm not saying they're not part, clearly, of our talent management. But it seems to me that is too exclusive. So where else could we go? Well, we could say talent means everybody with some potential to do a bigger or broader job in the future. That's a reasonable definition. If you take a snapshot of an organization at any point in time, that is probably close to 50%. Or others would say talent means those who possess a term called strategic capabilities. Now, you can find that term in the literature, but basically it's those who are particularly valuable to our organization. And that, of course, opens up a lot of options. It certainly includes those who are going to make future leaders, but it's broader than that, isn't it? So I'd like to suggest to you the definition that I think an organization should use. I think it is groups of people who have a strategic capability, and obviously we need to define that. We need to define that in relation to our USPs as an organization and our mission. There are lots of job roles that are unique and special, for which there is great competition to our mission. But there's others as well, groups of people who are just fundamental to make us work. But secondly, individuals. Individuals who are particularly valuable to us for whatever reason, who would be hard to replace. And that is not hierarchical. That's not even necessarily job-based. That is people who we really, really would miss. And they could be people right at the bottom of the organization. And remember that the people at the bottom of our organization who deal with our customers or our clients or the public, or in our case in Middlesex, our students, are particularly important. And those that are highly valued by our customers and so on are very valuable, without doubt. They're the people that make them want to come back and tell their friends. And then, of course, we will include individuals with the potential to take greater responsibility and leadership. Leadership is scarce. It always has been scarce. It always will be scarce. Those are clearly very valuable people. And we need to figure out, as early on in a person's career, whether they form part of that group. That's a critical part of talent management. And it is not everybody. Just because you're a graduate recruit doesn't mean you're going to become a leader in the organization. So what does this mean in terms of analytics and metrics, if I can use that term, metrics? Well, in the first one, it means that we have some clear understanding of the capability and the capability that we're looking for, whatever that might be. And we've got some scale of measuring that capability. And secondly, for the individuals particularly valuable to us, again, it's a set of criteria and identifying individuals against those criteria. And since we're talking about particularly valuable, we're not talking about an expertise scale on a strategic skill or piece of knowledge here. We're talking about those people that stand out, and they may well stand out for personal skills as well as special characteristics. And then lastly, we need to have metrics relating to the assessment of potential, a particularly difficult area. And of course, people's potential change with time. I might have potential today to go higher in an organization, but there comes a point where I don't anymore. So it's a continual process. Now, talent management is a set of processes as well. And this is my particular model that I have used with organizations as 6 different areas which comprise talent management. And all processes have their own measures, their own analytics to do with effectiveness and efficiency. But just to run through these. So we firstly define what we're talking about on talent, be very clear about that. And then we need to move to planning for it. What is our talent strategy in terms of planning? How many do we need of particular characteristics based on the previous definition? Secondly, we've got to identify it and acquire it. Identify it internally against the criteria we set. Identify it externally through recruitment or headhunters or however we want to do it, but we have to acquire it. And it might be argued that one of the most important things HR does as a contribution to the organization as a whole is the acquisition of talent, bringing great people into the organization. But just bringing them in is not enough. Then we have to think about how we develop them and deploy them. Where do we use them? How many graduates have left an organization frustrated at the mundane tasks they're being asked to do, frustrated at being treated as just nothing special at all? So the way we deploy them, the way we challenge them, and of course through that, the way we develop them is also a critical process. And finally, we need to keep them. We need to keep our talent. It is not good enough to say, oh, scratch our heads in retrospect and say, oh dear, this has been a very bad month. We have lost this talent and that talent. No, retention is about active ways of keeping them. And I'd love to talk more about that if time permitted. But what I have learned is that retaining talent is about treating them as individuals and keeping close to them continual dialogues with them. Now, most of these things are designed and sorted out by HR. But HR is but a service to the organization. It's a minor part of the organization in terms of the way it runs as a whole. And so we have to do something about my sixth area, which is about the culture. There needs to be a culture which is ingrained in all our managers, and especially our senior managers, that acquiring, developing, and keeping our talent is really, really important, and that they have to do things in order to work with that talent. HR cannot do everything themselves, nor should they. So there is this issue about defining what we mean by a talent nurturing culture. And there are instruments and tools whereby we can assess our culture, and that would be a part of it. So these are 6 elements of talent management, and you could understand why this would need to be a lot longer in talking about these. But I am going to just focus on 1 or 2 particular areas in the time we have available. I firstly want to say a word about the HR analytics side of it, because it's not just having a lot of numbers. So many of you, this is an ICT conference, you'll be familiar with pyramids like this, where we start with raw data of various kinds. In HR, we have things called human resource information systems, where we have data about all the individuals and organizations and so on, rich sources of data, but it's what we start with, it's just data. We then have to move to trying to understand what that data means, what it tells us, what information is ingrained within it. And we then convert that into saying, so what do we learn from that? So this is what it means, but what does it learn? And in order to learn from it, we need to start making comparisons. We need to look at trends. We need to look at how data is changing. We may need to make external or internal comparisons of that data. What can we learn from this? And lastly, how does it relate to other things we know? We use this term big data today, which is all about relating data knowledge in different parts of an organization together. And what does that tell us about what we should do in the future, if possible? And one of the key things I think about HR analytics, if I can just make a point, is that just focusing on what HR produces and the data available to HR is a step, but it is a much bigger step to say, now, how does this relate to what other departments are interested in? Into costs, for example, for finance, into marketing, for attractiveness, and employee brand, and so on. And of course, into customer satisfaction, where it's critical, and obviously into productivity. So just relating, we want to learn how to connect. That's really the key at the top. How do we connect our data with other data sources? Now, our HRIS, depending on how old it is and how useful it is, most modern systems that organizations have can be interrogated either regularly or at any time for all kinds of information that is in there or not. Here's some examples that may be of interest in our particular area of talent management. Promotions, internal versus external appointments, diversity criteria, labor turnover, of course, by group, particularly by talent group, by reasons for leaving. We do not want to hear that people are leaving us from our talent groups because they couldn't see anywhere to go in our organization. That is a failure of our talent management systems, if that's the case. And there's other things we can find out that may be relevant that we want to help understand our organization, as listed here. This is all what I would call hard data. So I distinguish in HR hard data being factual data. Provided it is put in correctly, it is facts. Usually, well, it's inevitably historical or current facts. It's not future facts, but it's facts. But in this area of talent management, we have to make judgments as well. We have to make subjective judgments. Here's some of the things we have to make judgments about. We talked about strategic capabilities. We have to make a judgment about the level of capability that people have. We have to make a judgment about people's potential. We have to make a judgment about their ambition, because ambition and potential are not always equal. And we often overestimate people's ambition. But sometimes, of course, we also maybe rightly assess their potential, but then find they don't have their ambition to reach it within our organization. So that's important as well. Of course, performance is important. We need to understand the levels of performance that people have. One of the big mistakes that historically is made, I'll come back to this in a minute, is to promote people based on performance. I'll explain why that's wrong in a minute. We also, very importantly, in talent management, we need to assess people's risk of leaving. We can use a simple high, medium, low, but if we believe people have a high risk of leaving, we may need to pay more attention. And people that have a low risk, who may be recently appointed, recently promoted, recently acquired, etc. And none of these are easy to do. They are subjective judgments. They're not going to work very well if they're the judgment of only one person. And we could spend quite a long time looking at the ways in which we do these assessments, but time does not allow us to do that. So we've got hard data and soft data that we need to help us here. Now, talking briefly about capability, this is my model of capability. And of course, in university, we specialize in giving people qualifications. But qualifications are a bed on which we build, on which people build. I put also in their experience. You will have noticed in interviews how keen managers are to understand what people have really done, because experience is where we learn things. You'll be familiar with the 70-20-10 rule, I'm sure. 70% of our learning comes from what we've done. 20% from what we learn from other people, 10% from classroom. Bad news, we might say, for universities. 10% for the classroom, but that doesn't mean it's not important. It's a very basic and important 10%. But experience is critical. So we need to know people's experience. On that are built three things. There's business and professional knowledge, knowledge and skills related to the area of the organization that people are in. There's personal skills and behaviors. Now, we are born with some of those, but mostly we develop and grow them. But then I also put in, even in Britain, who you know. Who you know is really important to supplement, particularly your professional knowledge. It's who you know in a very positive sense, who can help you develop. It's part of your capability, the range of people that you can call on to help you. So there's 6 different areas. So the 6th area is your attitudes and values, which begin to cement themselves relatively early in our careers and then become very hard to change. But they also can change and can do it. So that's capability. And we might say, how do we measure all these different things? Well, let me just leave you with one approach, which is a very basic approach, and that is the 5-point scale. And this works really well for knowledge and skills. It can be applied also to the other areas, other than qualifications, of course. And I'm using here 5 letters, which were designed by somebody who used to work for me a long time ago. And they work really well, I think. So basically, it's a 5-point scale of a little knowledge to expertise. And we could define those a little more clearly in each of our strategic capabilities. And we can do assessments of those. Self-assessment, boss assessment, peer assessment. And I have found basically that in this kind of area, those assessments are not going to differ terribly much. On the personal skills one, they might, because that all depends on our self-awareness as individuals. But a 5-point scale helps us to give a profile of expertise. Then we need to look at potential. And this is my definition of potential. And I borrow from Shell, who gave me the term CPP. It's really important. Currently perceived potential to go higher. And very important to remember, everybody has some potential to grow, but they'll grow in different ways. And I'll come back to that. We also need to realize that high performance does not equip you necessarily for higher responsibility higher up. Many a mistake has been made by promoting a salesman to sales manager, engineer to engineering manager, and so on and so on. Because the level of capabilities, the range of capabilities required at a level above changes. And once we get to a very top level of an organization, they are radically different from where we started. And you will know perhaps of the Peter principle, which we have to be careful of. Everyone has a tendency to rise to their level of incompetence. They go on getting promoted because they're good at their job until they reach a level where, sadly, they are no longer. How do we look at potential? Well, we tend to think of potential as height, going up an organization, taking more responsibility. But I'd like to think it's more than that. We need people with depth, expertise, people who may not be very good at managing people, but who are real experts in their field. We know that in academia very well. But there also is another valuable group, which is people with breadth. That is people who can do different things. They've had experience in different functions. They're able to be used in the organization in different ways. They're truly valuable. And manufacturing for years and years has always paid for cross skills. That is, but not everybody can do that. You know, some people are very challenged and they don't find it easy to move across. How do we measure potential? Well, the whole assessment process is tricky, but what we need is we want to move away from binary approach, right? You have it or you don't have it. It's not as simple as that. We have levels of potential because it depends on time and it's going to change over time. So that 1% of talent I talked about would be my A group here. People who we can see going at least 2 levels within 5 to 7 years in this height area. But then there are other levels, and my breadth level would be level C here, and D would be really you're in the right job and you're going to stay there now. And there are always some people in the E level as well. We can have a similar one for depth, levels of expertise. This is a typical ratio, by the way, of what we might find in an organization of if we took a snapshot of people in a group. But also we can do the same thing for depth. It's slightly different. Technical leadership actually has many of the same characteristics as managerial leadership. But it doesn't necessarily include managing people, or certainly not lots of people. So we can give a classification to potential, and then we can produce a profile of that potential in an organization, a department, a job family. And that profile is quite important. We can present it in nice ways. Because if we've got nobody at A or even at B, we've got a problem with progression. If we've got lots of people in D with nowhere to go, it's a problem. So there is a kind of ideal profile that we might like to look for, which we can compare with. We can also make an assessment of people leaving, and that's also an important ratio. If we've got a very high percentage of people with high risk of leaving, that's telling us we need to do something. So in addition to assessing potential on a regular basis, every 6 or 12 months maybe, this is something else we should assess. And part of our talent management, bringing it together with HR analytics, is to produce these kind of profiles. Now, it's very common in organizations to use something that was invented by General Electric called the 9-box grid, which is a comparison of performance versus potential. It does treat potential rather as binary here, but it at least recognizes that the two things are, in a sense, both important in order to understand the true talent that you have. So this is the one that was used by Virgin Atlantic, and many organizations use something similar. And of course, HR contributes the data to all of those. Now, a word about succession planning. Succession planning is also a data-driven process. It's a specialized subset, I think, of what I would call strategic workforce planning, where we look at planning all the organization. It's a specialized subset because it's based on individual critical jobs. We can't do workforce planning for one-off jobs, especially senior jobs. We can also use it for multiple roles that are critical, like country managers, factory managers, etc. What about the data we need there? Well, here's an example of the kind of data we might have for individuals. Just to explain, EDM stands for earliest date for move. We don't want people moving too fast, but if we let them stay in a job too long, then their risk of leaving will go up. And MOB stands for mobility. Many organizations, we need to know whether people are willing to move and so on. So it's a quick snapshot, and of course it can all be done electronically in a much more sophisticated way, of the job, of an individual job. Who's there now? Who have we got might be coming up, right? Their details and their readiness. Anybody ready now, or ready maybe in 1, 2, or 5 years? We can do something similar for pools, like factory managers. Same job title, maybe different grades depending on size, the locations where we have them, and looking ahead to the vacancies expected. Because a factory manager is an example of a job where you would want a deliberate experience to be built in before somebody is ready. And again, we can use our data to help plan for that. And the goal, by the way, is that A, we won't have any vacancies because we're always ready. This is the ideal. But secondly, also, we won't have any redundancies. That's the key goal of strategic workforce planning, that we are planning for any downsizes, any reductions in advance. And my experience is if you plan well enough in advance, you don't need redundancy. Redundancies are really bad news. They cost you a lot of money. Yes, they're not actually very good news for the persons concerned, normally. There are exceptions, of course. And they're not good news for the rest of the organization either. So some examples of the data we might use there. Now, what can I say in half an hour? Let me put this whole slide up. The goal of HR analytics, and we teach this a lot on my module, is to move beyond what happened, to move beyond diagnosis, statistics, analysis, etc., to be able to predict what might happen in the future, but also to prescribe. And so what I've done here, sticking again with talent management only, giving you some examples of how organizations that are advanced in this field are using HR analytics to get into those top 2 areas. They can predict leavers and, of course, take action to try and reduce that. They can predict talent shortages and take action, of course, to reduce those shortages. A key area is prescribing indicators of success. So by analysis of what we know makes people successful, we can recruit the right people and we can prescribe this is what you should look for. And that's really important. A lot of work has been done in that area. We can use it for scheduling career moves. Now, there are organizations that have said for the last 20 or 25 years, managing your career is up to you. To be honest with you, that is the antithesis of talent management. Managing talent is looking after your people. So it really should be a mutual task of understanding people's ambition and so on, and of taking some actions rather than just waiting for vacancies to be posted and people putting them up. We want to have fair selection processes. It doesn't go against that. But actually helping people develop careers. We do not want people arriving at the top of our organizations who've only done one thing. That is very bad news, especially, if I dare say so, if they've only done finance. Then we can do other things. We forward workforce planning in the bigger sense, of course. actually reducing attrition and minimizing talent losses, and then using our profiles for early warning of what I would call ill health. For example, unbalanced expertise and potential profiles in a group. So a very quick run through, and I'm not able to take questions, but I do invite you to send questions and comments if you wish to my email address in Middlesex, and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.